Okay, let's go ahead and get at it. All right, so what we're going to do, good morning to you first. I know you're enjoying your Veterans Day celebration, which I think is a wonderful thing. So to all veterans, thank you for your service. What we're going to do is we're going to pick up looking at, here on the outline, looking at competition with differentiated products. Now, just as kind of a quick reminder as to where we are. All right, so we looked at competition, and again, this is the Odyssey chapter, right? We're going to be here for a while. All right, so we looked at competition, we looked at monopolies, and then we started looking at two things that were kind of in the middle, an oligopoly, which we're not going to spend a lot of time with, and I'm going to make an adjustment on the outline here in a second, but also looking at what we call the MC firm, right? The monopolistic competition firm. So somewhere in the middle. Okay, now, so what we're going to do looking at the MC firm, and again, when I say MC, monopolistic competition, the firms that are in this industry, we're going to do a couple things. We're going to do a lot of drawing. So as I promised you earlier on your exams, you're going to be doing a lot of graphing, a lot of drawing. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at two conditions and kind of look at the monopolistic competitive firm, their decision making, right? So we're going to look at where they are when it comes to a profit, where it is when they get into a loss condition, but also what's going to happen in the long run. So we're going to see things smooth out. So we're going to see largely profit, then we're going to get into loss, and then we're going to see where things wind up in the long run. So we'll do first, let's go ahead and look at a condition whereby the firm is in a profitable, condition. So again, traditional graph here, right? And look at the price, quantity, right? There's our origin. Sometimes we remember to draw this and sometimes we don't. Okay, but that's all right. Okay, so we're going to anchor that demand curve. All right, there's our demand curve. Go with a little red for a marginal cost curve. Give myself enough space to identify that. Remember, also our supply curve, so that nothing's changed there. All right, we're going to go with a marginal, whoops. I'm going to put it right. All right, that's our marginal revenue curve. Okay. And we'll go ahead and plug in let me go ahead and draw this first. Sometimes I miss that one. All right. Okay, so there's our monopoly price. Okay, now, remember this is a monopolistic competition firm. So when I say monopoly price, I'm talking about the MC firm, and that's fine. Okay, but one thing we're going to add here, and let's go with a little brown to throw it in there, all right, is we're going to add in an average total cost curve, right? So an ATC there. And let's go back to our black marker here. We're going to go ahead and put in some points here. So this is A, B. Again, we've done this really before, so it's not... tell you what, let me make this C, at least for now. Okay, now, what we're going to do is box, in fact, let's go ahead and use green. All right. Throw a couple of points on here. I'm losing all my markers here. All right. Call that D, E. Okay. So just in case, just to make clear so you can see it. All right, A, B, D, E, C is over here. Okay. The profit area, right, for the MC firm, again, they're setting a monopoly price, so they start off acting like that. All right, start off acting like, and get that in your notes. Again, they're going to start out acting like a monopolistic firm, but again, they've got a little bit more competition, remember, from our last session. Okay, and essentially this is their profit area, right? So essentially what this graph is showing is the monopolistic competition firm in a profit world, right? Doing well. Couple things to notice, right? The area of profit is between, right, the demand curve where they set the price, right? Monopoly price. In fact, let's make this a little bit more obvious to you. Okay. So in other words, the monopolistic price is really A and D, that line, just to make it clear. Okay, and their profit, right, zone is really between A and B, right, that zone here. So if you wanted to say, what's the profit zone for a monopolistic competitive firm in the short run, right? Okay, in the short run, it's basically A, B, D, E. Now, notice a couple of things, right? They're above, well above marginal cost, right? But just, that zone is a little smaller, right? Because we had to throw in an average total cost curve, okay? Now, by the way, if we were to put another point here, let's go with black here, F, that's still the socially desirable point, okay? All right, so that's still the socially desirable point. Nothing has really changed there. All right. Okay. Now, a couple things, right? We'll just go over here. Just a little side note. All right. Profit or price is still greater than marginal cost. Profit zone is A, B, D, E. So I might ask you a question. Where's the profit zone? Identify it for me, right? You can just do this, and you can stop the recording anytime you want. Profit zone. Okay, now, again, as I promised, we're going to be doing a lot of drawing on this exam, but by the way, this is just the starting point. Now, remember, it's not a pure monopoly. This is monopolistic competition. Firms start off like this, right? If they know if the industry, if you will, knows that this particular firm is generating a profit, they're going to get in. Okay, now remember, we looked at the business cycle, right? Remember, there's a profit by one firm, other firms are going to get in. Other firms get in, right? Quantity is going to go up, price is going to go down, right? More firms will enter, right? To the point where this might not work for that firm, okay? So let's go ahead, let me get this marker up here. Let's go ahead and change things up a little bit. So we just looked at a graph whereby short run MC firm, right? Short run MC firm. Let's see what I can do with my black marker there. Short run MC firm profit. Okay, now let's take a look at what a loss would look like. All right, sometimes we just got to clean them up. There's our origin. Sometimes remember, sometimes we don't. It's okay. Okay, we're going to anchor that demand curve. All right, I'm going to put this in next just so I can. We're going to make the average total cost curve in green. Use a little red. Give myself enough space here. Marginal cost, which of course is also our supply curve, right? Oh, let's switch things up a little bit. Go with a little light brown here. All right. Make sure I give myself enough space. Let's go with an orange. Pretend that's a straight line, of course. And let's go a little light blue here. Now, I'm going to call this the ATC point. All right, and a little light brown here. Make this a little more pronounced. All right, call this a loss zone. We'll put some points on here in a minute. Okay, and we'll call this A, B, C, D, E, F, just for the heck of it. Okay, so let's talk about what's happening here. Okay, so monopolistic competitive firm was making money. Other firms see this. Other firms get in the market, right? Overall quantity goes up, price goes down, and what happens, right, is that demand curve, now we're not showing it, but the overall demand curve moved to the left, and basically at one time it was above here. If you look at your other graph, right, it was above here, and what it did is move. I'll tell you what, instead of drawing the graph, we'll go ahead and draw the force arrow, right? All right, we'll draw the force arrow there. Okay, so essentially, just to be clear, the marginal cost curve didn't move. The average total cost curve didn't move. This curve moved. It was out here. It's still anchored, right? Pivoted up there. Now, I drew it so it's a little bit more dramatic and you can kind of see it. But here comes the demand curve. It comes a little bit closer, right, to the origin, if you will. And now you have the ATC point, the monopolistic price. Now remember, it's still really the MC firm price, but we'll just call it that for now. By the way, here's Q. Okay, now, so what we have here is a loss zone. So I might say, draw me a graph, show me the loss zone, etc., right? And essentially, there it is, okay? So, their price, right, attached to the demand curve, right, now below average total cost, right, and they're making a loss, all right? Now, remember, monopolistic competition, so that average total cost curve had to be in there. There's their marginal cost and the revenue. This is where they're producing. Now, in such a situation, right, other firms entered. We're assuming these other firms will be treated the same, right? Or their impact will be the same. And again, we're kind of ignoring things like unequal technology, unequal cost structures, that kind of thing. So we don't have to worry about that right now. Okay, but nonetheless, all right, we assume all these firms will be in this situation. So what we're going to do now is transition to the long run. So first chart, MC firm making a profit. This chart, this graph rather, right? MC firm making a loss. Both are short term. Graph 1 short term, graph 2 short term. So now what we're going to do, right, is see what happens in the long run, right? Let's see what happens in the long run. Okay, so let's get that sucker over there. All right. Okay. Now you can kind of imagine what's going to happen. That demand curve is somehow going to shift back in, right? Okay, so I think this one may be a little bigger than the ones we've had. Okay. So there's our origin. There's price, there's quantity. Okay, so give ourselves some space. There's our demand curve, right, which is now adjusted. Let me give myself a little more room than that, I think. There's our green average total cost curve. All right. You have to make this one a little more pronounced. Marginal cost, also our supply curve, right? Marginal revenue curve. Okay. Now, a couple things I gotta make a little clear, and I probably should have bent that sucker down a little bit more. So let me do that. Let me bring that average total cost curve down just a little to make that work. Okay. All right. And just to make it kind of clear as to what we're doing here. We're assuming the demand curve and the average total cost curve meet, and they're going to meet at point A, right? That's still C, right? And what's going to happen, you can kind of imagine, I think, where this is headed, right? There's your quantity. There's the monopoly price, but remember, this is monopolistic competition, so somewhere in the middle, okay? But we're also going to put a point B over here. Let me go ahead and carry this out. Okay, and that's why we had to adjust the. Okay, now let's go with a little. Let's do a little, another color here. Let's go with some pink here. Okay, all right, so you can kind of see a gap. In fact, I'll just draw the gap right in here. Okay, all right. Now, a couple things, okay? Now, remember, graph number 1, monopolistic competition, firm doing well, making a profit. Other firms see this, they get in the market, quantity goes up, price goes down, people start making a loss, right? That was graph 2. Here, this is the long run monopolistic competition, right? Long run monopolistic competition. Notice what's going to happen. Over the long run, right? Tell you what, let's go with a little bit of maroon here, all right? What's going to happen is at point A, just to make it clear, price is going to start to equal marginal cost. Okay, now what that means, right, is that essentially, whoops, sorry about that. All right, sorry about that. All right, is the competition is taken over, and that's basically how things have worked out, right? So over time, right, that curve has shifted. Now, notice, however, you're still, right, a condition where, in fact, let me go ahead and use blue, right? But because of the difference between A and C, price is still greater than marginal cost, right? But competition is taken over to the point where price equals, right, the average total cost. Now, this is the one thing I absolutely want you to get down in your notes, right? Is that we're still looking at something that's different from pure competition or perfect competition. If it's perfect competition, right, price equals marginal cost, which is the same as marginal revenue. Everybody's a price taker. Remember that price line goes all the way out. So you're still making a little bit, right, of profit there, a little bit of a gap there, all right? You're setting the price at your average total cost, okay? All right, your marginal cost is there. Okay, so when we're fully into about as competitive as a monopolistic competition environment can get, this is what it's going to look like, all right? This would be perfect competition. That is not what we're seeing here, right? What we're seeing here is basically what we have up here, right? Price is greater than price is greater than your marginal cost, and price is set at the average total cost, Okay, so this point of tangency becomes incredibly important, right? This is the tangent point. In fact, let's go ahead and put that up there, right? All right, that's your tangent point, your point of tangency. So it's right there, you can see it. All right, it's basically where the demand curve hits your average total cost curve. Now, what happened between the second graph and this third graph, right, this is graph number 3, is that demand curve swung over a little bit, right? Some firms simply couldn't make it, right? They entered because they saw the profit, right, after chart 2, but between graph 2 and graph 3, they said, no, we just can't make it, and they wound up getting out. Okay, now what we're going to do is switch gears and look at, in fact, I'm going to keep this up here for a little bit. We're going to look at monopolistic versus perfect competition. Okay, so monopolistic competition and perfect competition. Now, notice it's not monopoly. Right? So we're looking at the MC world, monopolistic competition, and say the PC world, right? Perfect competition, right? So just looking at things a little bit differently. Okay, now, with that said, you kind of see, whoops, right? Where the point of tangency is. In fact, let me fix this one a little bit, which I think I can do. All right. Just a couple of adjustments here to save time. Okay, so there we go. We kind of see it now. But what we need to do now is put a point there. All right, we're going to call that point D. Okay, now, as what we've known and learned, right, throughout the semester, the socially desirable, right, place for production would be D. All right, and let's go with a different color there. We'll do a little light blue here. All right. Okay, now we'll call this the socially desirable, socially efficient. Socially efficient point, all right? And this Q here, we're using light brown for that, all right? This Q here is essentially the MC production point. Okay, all right, so just kind of trying to use what we've got here. Okay, now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out, right? Let's use a dark brown here for this one, just so it's a little obvious to you. Looks like a marker's not going to make it. Okay. Yep, that one's just not going to make it. All right. Got another brown here. All right. Okay, so MC here, let me just darken that in a little bit. Okay, this is your marginal cost point, right? All right, now, what we want to do is talk a little bit about a couple of the situations that we have. Now, basically what we're doing is we're doing nothing more than comparing monopolistic competition with perfect competition, okay? Now, if you will, then we're just going to keep this Q here. This is where supply equals demand. Everybody would be a price taker. You get that idea. Okay, two problems that we see. All right. The first problem that we see, I'll tell you what. Let's go with a black marker here. Okay, is the gap here. All right. So between, right, Q, where we are talking about monopolistic competition in that production level, and Q, socially efficient. I'll tell you what, we can even do this. Let's go with a little light brown here. We'll call that Q1, just to make it easy, and we'll call this Q2, okay? All right. The difference here, right, is excess capacity, right? The difference there being excess capacity, okay? Now that's a problem, all right? Now essentially what it also is, it's also a shortage, right? So in the sense, this is what people would want based on this, right? What would be socially efficient, socially desirable, whatever, right? And what's actually being produced. So within the market, a couple of things here. Within the market, there's excess capacity, but we're also underserving our consumer population. Okay? Now follow me, right? Difference between these 2 points. All right? Excess capacity, which means there's a shortage, right? Demand's out here. All right? Demand's here, but we're only producing here. Okay? Which also means, right, with a we're not going to draw it, with a monopolistic competition environment, an MC firm, all right, an MC firm environment, if you will, lower consumer surplus, lower total surplus, right? Lower total surplus. Okay, now, got another problem, okay? We're going to talk about the markup problem, okay? All right, we're going to talk about the markup problem. Here, let me get this sucker out of the way. It's our markup. Okay, it's our markup. Now, this is the markup, right, that we have. This is what the MC firm is charging. Again, I know we're calling it monopoly price, but again, it's the MC firm, what they're charging, all right? And essentially, this is what they could. I mean, if they, if they really wanted to, sell it at cost, right? This would be your selling at cost point C. Okay, now, with that said, all right, let's go with, is there a color I haven't used yet? I guess I've used them all. I need some new colors, right? Let me throw, you know what, that ain't gonna work. Let's use pink, all right? Let's say I took this point D all the way across, okay? Now what D is, of course, is really where the price would be for perfect competition. Right? So let's call it the perfect competition price. Right? The perfect competition price. Okay? Now, again, problem number 1, excess capacity. Problem number 2 is the markup. Right? You've got a lot of people, a lot of consumers, right? Because of this shortage that aren't able to buy in, right? They could buy here. Right? They just can't afford to buy here. All right? So that markup is no different than what we have with a monopoly. All right? Again, lower consumer surplus, lower total surplus. But if you're a monopoly firm, you certainly don't care. And it looks like if you're a monopolistic firm in a monopolistic competitive environment, you don't care either. Right? Now again, this is just charts. I mean, we're not actually asking people who run these companies what they really think, but what they really care about. But I think you get the idea, right? Okay, so nonetheless, there's a lot on here, right? There's a lot on here, okay? But if you think about what we're trying to say here is that with a monopolistic competitive firm, we've got an excess capacity problem, we've got a markup problem, both of which together contribute to a loss of consumer surplus and therefore a loss of total surplus in the end. Okay, so again, just a little bit different. Okay, all right. Okay, so what we're going to do now, all right, is talk a little bit about monopolistic competition and social welfare, and there really isn't a whole lot to talk about here, okay? And then what we're going to do is actually we're going to take a little bit of a dive and skip some of the outline just to move the class along. Okay, so let's look at monopolistic competition and social welfare. Now, the question becomes, now we know monopolies are generally not good for social welfare, right? We know that perfect competition is the ideal place for social welfare, okay? Monopolies, very inefficient, right, at allocating resources. Perfect competition, very efficient in allocating resources. Okay, we get that. That's not the problem, okay? Now, monopolistic competition, remember, somewhere in the middle. It's probably a little closer to a monopoly, but somewhere in the middle. All right, let's talk a little bit about some of the problems, right? And this chart certainly shows it. Okay, so we'll leave this up here for a little bit. Number one is that you still have inefficiency, right? Total inefficiency would be over here in the perfect competition world, right? Where that PC price, perfect competition price, right, would match, right? Socially efficient level of production, right? You're producing where supply, remember your marginal cost curve is also your supply curve, all right, where demand meets, and everything is efficient. So you still lack some efficiency, okay? Again, as price is certainly above your marginal cost. If in a perfectly competitive market, it would be lower, and marginal cost would equal marginal revenue, which would equal price, and everything goes out that way. Remember that price line, okay? All right. The second problem that we have with monopolistic competition is we have externalities, right? So we're going to talk about two types of externalities. And anytime you think of an externality, it's basically economics talk for inefficiency that can somewhat be harmful, okay? All right, so problem number one is what we call product variety, right? As an externality, right? Product variety. The simple reality is that even in a monopolistic competitive world, right, an MC world, right, we've got monopolistic competition firms operating there, you're still not going to get the variety you would have with perfect competition. So again, you get a few more products that you would have with a monopoly, so that's good, but you're not going to get nearly the variety you would have in perfect competition. So that's one externality. The second is what we call business stealing, right? The business stealing externality. So the idea is that some firms will kind of creep in an MC world and take some of that monopoly's business from it. Now again, this is certainly negative for the firms that are in that particular market, but the fear is that some of these firms will gobble up each other to the point maybe there might be just one firm left, and then we go all the way back to monopoly, right? So in other words, there isn't a big enough of a problem